Okay, guys. Hi, my name is Girish, your host for today for Back to Basics. Tonight, what we are going to be talking about is poison. What is poison? Tonight's poison, that is. So, in this glass that I have in my hand is my tonight's poison. And what is yours? So, we're going to talk to my guest today. His name is Jazz. I'm going to call him Jazz. He's known for jazz for many years, and he runs tonight's poison. So let's talk to Jazz. Jazz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, man. Got a little itchy throat going on a little bit. How you doing?
Good, good. How about you?
Good, man. I got a little dryness going on here, and I don't know if you can recommend me as a doctor back to basics, some sort of remedy for this dry throat.
Yeah, so you tell me. I have a glass in my hand, so I don't know. I don't see anything in your hand right now.
I thought I was North Indian Punjabi, and you're starting without me.
Of-
You're way ahead of me. So
I'm way ahead of you. Yeah.
I'm going to go with a staple here, Macallan 18. Kind of tough to see in this light, but going to start us off here in a little tonight's poison glass.
Well, it's quite
And
funny because I have the same thing. So it's amazing how you and I think alike.
oh, look at that. That's awesome. This was not rehearsed at all, right? So
No,
this
it
is
was
awesome.
not. Yeah, yeah. So Jazz, first thing is first. Let's take a cheers.
Cheers
Cheers to
to
you.
living and breathing.
Leave and breathing. So, Jazz, first question is before we get into anything, what is back to basics for you?
Oh man, back to basics. It's a lot of things, but mainly for me, it's getting back to your core. And I hope that everyone during the pandemic has thought about this, has self-assessed. I know I did over the course of the last year, and it's getting back to basics. Getting back to basics means getting to your core, looking at your health, looking at your balance in life, looking at your work ethic, your family ethic, again your balance. And it's funny when you invited me to this to shoot this. I thought about back to basics briefly, and it's something that just runs through the vein for me, because running a sales team, I run a sales team now, but I ran a sales team for over 13 years. And in January we always reset, said be thankful for last year, let's go hit it this year, and let's try to reassess ourselves. And one of the things, motivating factors that I always use was tell my team, hey guys, back to basics. Let's get back to basics and figure out what we did right, what we did wrong, and let's start from the fresh. Let's start from the core and reset ourselves with back to basics. So it means a lot of great things, but for me, it's just self-assessing, taking a pause, and thinking about where we're at.
Yeah. So it's really ironic that people they went back to basics in 2020, but they should have gone back to basics forever. But it's a good thing and it's a good start that we're doing this. Not between you and me, I think throughout the world, I think. And it's great to go back to basics on that. So, Jazz, how did you start this whole thing? First thing is congratulations on tonight's poison. We're going to talk about that too. But how did you start this whole thing? Where did you start this whole thing?
So I've always been a marketing buff. You know, out of college, IT, and I slowly realized that as much as I liked IT, the computer was a hobby growing up. I've known you for a long time, and since I was a kid, I always enjoyed computers and electronics. I slowly realized that sales and marketing is something I enjoy much more. When the Y2K thing happened and the industry took a dip, I got into sales a little bit. I enjoyed it so much more, and it brought me back to my childhood, because as a child, I used to go to my grandfather's business in India growing up, as a little kid, and I always liked seeing that interaction, customer service atmosphere, and I always enjoyed it. Whereas as an IT world, I would get a 2 months project and finish in 2 weeks, and then be on Amazon or eBay. So stuck behind a cubicle. So I always enjoyed marketing and sales. And in the last 15 years, I've been blessed to be part of a spirits industry as a wholesaler. And 6, 7 years back, I started since I have access to so much, being an insider of the industry as a wholesaler, if something new is coming out 2 months from now in retail, I'm already finding about it now.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as I have the okay to start talking about it, I utilize social media. And tonight's poison, you were mentioning there, I guess I've been blessed to, resonate to that name and be part of that name and become that name is because of my Instagram account under the same name, Tonight's Poison. I'm definitely no Kim Kardashian, but I don't have too much skin to show, so I keep it covered. And I show my whiskeys, and mainly it's about sharing knowledge and my passion for talking about spirits, learning about spirits, each and every day learning. When I first came into the industry, somebody asked me, "What's your knowledge of spirits industry?" I said 4 out of 10. Now somebody asks me, I still say 7 out of 10. All right, even though it might be 9 out of 10 compared to some most common people, but I'm always learning, always evolving, and it's sharing that education has allowed me to be blessed to be Tonight's Poison as an identity on social media.
So, Jazz, I think your answer should be 9 out of 10 every time. Whenever I ask you that, anyone asks you that, the reason why is because there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
Don't you agree? Now, because
No, 100%. That's why I said even 7 out of 10.
Yeah. So I've known you for many years, guys. You have to understand, me and Jazz have gone a long way. I'm much younger than him.
Mhm.
So we won't get into the age part of things, but it seems like I've known him for a long time. So it's easier for me to talk to him about drinks, about whiskey, about bourbon, about maybe wine sometimes. But I think he knows more about whiskeys and single malt. So let's talk about that a little, if you don't mind. So, first of all, whiskey versus single malt. What's the difference?
So I'll give you a couple different things. So maybe you have more questions for me, and this might answer all of them in some cases. A single malt is basically made, and this is gonna get a little geeky, so I don't mean to bore you guys at all, but I'll keep it as simple as possible. A single malt is made with malted barley in a pot still, and it's from a single distillery. Okay, it showcases the very distinct flavor and nuances of that single distillery style. Okay, a blended whiskey, okay, is made by combining various different single malts whiskeys, but it's made in a column still.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, column stills are big long things, and usually they're continuous. And single malts are made in a pot still typically, and they're batch oriented. You batch it, you take it out, and then you do another batch and things like that. That's kind of summarizes a little bit about as far as blended and single malt. And I'll tell you a little bit about bourbon while we're at it, and we can get into it more in depth if you want later on. But bourbon is also referred to as whiskey, but a bourbon is a mixture of grains or mash, but at least 51% of it has to be corn. And that's the key difference between a bourbon whiskey, blended whiskey, and single malt. The corn is what gives the bourbon its distinct sweet flavors, and the environment has a lot to do with, how it comes out. The ground aspect, the temperature aspect, the warehousing aspect varies from region to region to region, and that's why bourbons vary differently as far as aging factor goes. Scotland and Kentucky has completely different temperatures, as does India, as does Japan. So that plays a huge part in giving us distinguished taste profile for each different type.
So, Jazz, when you said pots, you don't mean like pots and pans we just come out of the cabinets and we can just boil it, can we?
Now, these are gigantic pots. Look them up on Google. Think of a tea kettle pot like that, but gigantic.
Okay.
And that's what I mean. Yeah.
So
But their name is pot still.
So and what does it mean by blended whiskey? What does that mean? You mean like Johnny Walker or something, or what do you mean by that?
So yeah, Johnny Walker, Schiss. There's a bunch of blended whiskeys. There's a lot of them. Johnny Walker Black could have, don't quote me on this, up to 30 different single malt whiskeys. And the one analogy I can give you that I was thinking about the other day, and at least this is my analogy. Some people might agree to disagree, and vice versa. Nowadays, are we allowed to curse on the show?
Sure.
Okay. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one,
Mhm.
right? So
Yes.
everybody is an expert nowadays. You watch on YouTube, and I'm not saying I'm an expert. Like I said, I am 7 out of 10 of my whiskey knowledge, or wine and spirits knowledge, because I'm always eager to learn and learn from others. And your palate, your mind, everything evolves. Uh, so to me, what's your favorite instrument, Girish, as far as in an orchestra goes? What's the favorite instrument that you like enjoy
I,
listening to?
I think it would be a guitar or a violin.
A guitar or violin? I like the violin part. That's fantastic. I love violins myself also. So think of a symphony, an orchestra, okay, with 50 different instruments, right? But multiple people, as all the single malt distilleries. Each instrument is a single malt, and all of them playing together is very harmonious, right?
Hmm.
It's creating this harmonious sound, and that is a blended whiskey,
Hmm.
okay? But when you want to fine tune and you want to listen to that pure sound coming out of the violin that really gives you chills,
Hmm.
that is a distinct sound coming out of that violin,
Yes.
that is a single malt.
See, so you're telling me that, let's say if you see this glass, yeah, and if I have Johnny Walker half filled versus maybe half of a single malt, do you think that's a right notion of a blended versus single malt? Because single malt is more, I guess, more stronger.
It's not stronger, by no means. I mean, both of them, to be called to for a Scotch whiskey or single malt to be called Scotch whiskey or single malt, has to be 40% alcohol minimum.
Mm.
Most of them you'll see they'll be anywhere from 40 to 40. 43 is very typical. For example, this Macallan 18, I bet you is 43. It's 43. All right. But
So
this is
it's
a single malt. It's a
so
single malt, right?
mhm.
Go ahead.
So Jazz, let me ask you a question. So you see this glass here. So if I put the same quantity or less quantity of a single malt versus whiskey, do you think it's stronger or less? What do you thought? What is your thought process on this?
So I feel, as I mentioned earlier, with the symphony and orchestra, the blended whiskey kind of gives you a very harmonious taste profile, very balanced, very light, but nice. Whereas a single malt almost gives you a very distinct, sometimes a little bolder, depending on the distillery style. Uh, so if I would say a single malt should give you a little bit more distinct, a little louder, a little more distinct taste profile than a blended. But also you have to keep in mind that most single malts are usually 43% alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and most blends, not all, are 40% alcohol. So you are getting 3% more alcohol in your single malts. Typically, this is not always the case, but it is certainly the case most of the time. For example, the Macallan 18 here is 43%, and if I was to grab a Chivas or Buchanan or Johnny Walker behind me, it'll be 40%. So that also, the higher the alcohol, the more bolder, slightly bolder the taste. It'll feel heavier on your tongue. You'll feel the alcohol more over, a couple of drinks. So it imparts a little bit, but honestly, it's really your personal preference as to what you enjoy drinking. And I am always a big proponent of trying to not push necessarily, but nudge along to try to expand your
So
palate
I
by
guess the
trying new
question
things.
should have been taste versus quantity, or the intake, I should say.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So now, Jazz, let me ask you a question about whiskey. Whiskey with the E or without the E? What's the difference on those?
So everybody culturally has had a different style, of a different spelling of how they pronounce whiskey. Typically, you'll find that whiskey with an E is America, is Ireland, and whiskey without the E is mostly Europe, right? Scotland, India, Japan, and I think Canadian also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a slightly different way. I mean, there's more historic background as far as culturally, and Ireland, especially Ireland, Scotland went back and forth. It's a great story. I'm not going to be your Google nerd or wiki nerd here, but you can absolutely look it up. Look up the difference between whiskey with an E versus without an E, Ireland versus Scotland, and you'll see a very interesting story on that. So we can do a whole episode on that.
So I guess there's a difference between recognize with the S versus Z, correct? That's how it is?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing.
Okay.
There's some cultural relevance to it too, though.
Okay, so we won't get into that, but we can always Google and we can always wiki it and find out.
Or message me, and I'll be more than happy to elaborate or forward you guys.
So guys, you can message him anytime on Tonight's Poison. He's pretty responsive on that, and you can also email him too. And I think Jazz, can you just mention your email address to the folks?
Sure. It's my website is tonightspoison.com. Pretty simple. All the links are on there. Instagram is Tonight's Poison. Also, my email address is tonightspoison@gmail.com.
Awesome.
But I have a request.
Yes.
Before we proceed.
Yes.
And this is only for the people who are not listening to this while driving. Mm-hmm. Only for the people who are watching this on their home computer or they're at home. And if they're in their office, put it in a coffee mug. No, I don't really, advocate that. But please, if you're watching this, hit that pause button. Take a 5-second break, go out, pour yourself a dram, because we're going to continue this only if you sip along with us. So please sip along with us. It'll be great. It's COVID situation going on still. And unfortunately, we can't get together and drink in bars. But you know what? I want to feel like I'm having a drink with you. So please pour yourself a drink and drink along as long as you're not driving.
So guys, when you're back after getting a drink, just make sure you do hashtag Tonight's Poison, hashtag Tonight's Basic, hashtag Tonight's Back to Basic. So any of those comments, just put it in your video, and then we know that you're listening. You better be listening, because this is a good episode. Now
comment below and exactly what he said. Comment below, and that'll be great. I'll know exactly who's posting that. Girish will know exactly who's posting that, and we'll feel a connection because you guys were watching and listening and playing along and drinking along.
So Jazz, let me ask you a question about bourbon. Okay. Bourbon, I think that's from Kentucky. Is that a myth or is that correct?
So bourbon predominantly is mostly from Kentucky, but it doesn't have to be. Only reason bourbon seem to think that it is only from Kentucky is because that's where the history lies. Kentucky is known for, as I mentioned earlier briefly, that 51% of a bourbon must be corn based. And the Kentucky is known for its corn crops. Florida is known for what? Oranges, right? Florida oranges.
Yes.
Very similarly. So by law, bourbon doesn't need to be made in Kentucky, but it just happens that way because that's where most of the distilleries are, and that's where most of the crop is coming from. You could make a bourbon in some other parts of the country. However, if you'll notice, the bourbons which are made in Kentucky will say Kentucky bourbon on the label. The bourbons that you won't see Kentucky bourbon on the label are not made in Kentucky. Could be Indiana, could be Alabama, could be wherever, right? So that's kind of the difference. But I would say 90 to 95% of the bourbons are made in Kentucky. They don't have to be.
So Jazz, just my question only, forget about everyone else there, but bourbon from Trader Joe's or bourbon from the liquor store?
Ooh. So nowadays there's so many brands. I mean, whiskey has gone up through the roof in consumption over the last 10 years. The demand has grown so much. And, the people from the 80s and 90s who were sticking to that one brand because they saw their grandfather drink it, then they saw their dad drink it, now they're drinking it. That whole thing has changed. The generation now and the generation even before us, in some capacity, are willing to try new things. And the demand has gone up so much and people love to try new things. I mean, that people are willing to try new whiskeys and new spirits. So it's created a demand for non-branded or cheaper labeled whiskeys. And, I would say, to each its own. I personally feel that the bigger boys, the brand labels definitely have a lot of heritage. Where you look at Jack Daniel's, has got, vast history. You look at Jim Beam, has got vast history. It's tough to compete with that. But There are absolutely a lot of great brands which have been launched in the last 10 years. For example, Widow Jane is made out of Brooklyn, okay? And they own limestone water reservoir. That limestone out of that reservoir coming out in upstate New York was used to make Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, and
Yeah.
the water source is coming from there, and they're using that to make Widow Jane. So there are a lot of smaller brands that don't have hundreds of years of history that are also good. But to answer your question, there's no. You'll have to give me brand A and brand B, and I have to try it side by side, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you what's better and what's not. But that's for me. For somebody else, it could be completely different. It's
So
personal experience and personal taste profile.
so guys, I think the answer is that you should try variety ones, and whatever suits you, that's your brand.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic recommendation. I would urge everyone to expand your palate. How do you expand your palate? If all you had was dal and roti, lentil and wheat bread, right? All your life. I mean, how do you know what's good, what's not?
So Jazz, I
You got
think
to try things.
when I asked you this question, like last time when I was on the phone with you, you gave me an analogy of a butter chicken. So try that butter chicken analogy if you can. Go ahead.
Oh man, very very difficult to. Yeah, it's on the spot type of thing. But so okay, so butter chicken. Butter chicken is a staple North Indian Punjabi. I'm Punjabi. I'm Sikh dish. When we go to restaurants, how do we judge the restaurant if it's good or bad? Is by ordering butter chicken. If butter chicken is good, we're impressed. That means you know what, the place is good.
Yeah.
And butter chicken is one of those dishes, and I'm not sure if this is the exact analogy you're looking for, but so butter chicken, basically, if you take, first of all, if you take an unaged whiskey, what is an unaged whiskey? It's a moonshine, right? You distill the whiskey out of the pot still or column still, however you want to do it. And then you put it into your glass. It's white liquid. It tastes like chicken, raw chicken just cooked with no salt, no ingredients, nothing. It has some personality. Maybe it has a sprinkle of salt in it. Okay. But it doesn't really have the essence of what you actually good whiskeys are. The good whiskey's essence comes from the barrel, the aging, the ingredients in the butter chicken. So the analogy of the butter chicken is basically, take different ingredients, the spices, the salt, whatever ingredients the chef is using. And each chef is different. Each restaurant is different. Each country has a different touch to it, different feel for it. And that's how these different brands are. Everybody has their own recipe. Some age it, they feel the perfect whiskey for them is 15 years. Some don't even put an age statement. So you know what? By law, it's 3 years. Okay, you know what? 7 years is fine. I don't have to put a 10 or 12 on here. I like my whiskey at 7 years and it's fine. And I don't need to put an age statement because people predominantly think if it's less than 10-year old, if it says 7 on the label,
Yeah.
maybe it's not good. No, it's good. It's just whatever each chef, master distiller's recipe is, similar to butter chicken chef, right? Depending on the ingredients. So, I would say go to different restaurants and try different butter chickens. Go to your liquor store and try different whiskeys. And more you try, the more your palate would expand, more you learn, and more you evolve. Just like reading a book, just like giving yourself life experiences by stepping out of your house, just like being adventurous. It's like anything in life. And I can't think of a better analogy to talk about in this show because this show is called Back to Basics.
Yeah, I think the first time I spoke to you and the analogy you gave me about butter chicken, I'm like, you know what? This guy is definitely going to be in my show. But thank you for that analogy again. And it's pretty on top. So what is jazz for the next 5 years? I mean, you have done so much in the last 15, 20 years that I've known you.
I would want to continue pushing my limits. I would want to continue pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and definitely, self-assess during COVID, as I hope all of you did in some capacity. And for me to keep pushing myself and making myself uncomfortable to continue growing. So next 5 years, I plan to expand the brand for Tonight's Poison to create a bigger community, bigger audience via multitudes of avenues like the podcast here with Girish. I'm also working on something with a web series with awesome TV that's being worked on also, and basically, help educate, help give information that by if one person watches this podcast and learns something new, I am super happy that I did this. I'm happy regardless because I know Girish for so many years. But if one person learns something, one thing new, I'm happy with that. And I hope to take that one thing, one person learning in the next 5 years and multiply by as many people as I touch as possible. And it's not about, oh, I got X amount of followers, I got X amount of engagement. It's about just getting and giving information. If I'm an industry insider, I've learned so much over the years. And if somebody's passionate about spirits, I want to be able to help and help you expand more. I mean, that's my thing. I'm not looking for money. I'm not looking for this. Of course, and everybody wants to grow financially and things happen. But you know what I've learned over the years, and maybe this is a Sikh mantra, and our people are known for this, is you give, you do your thing, and you just follow that straight line, and good things automatically happen, like karma. Golden Temple. If you look up Golden Temple for people who are not familiar with our culture, Golden Temple is in the Guinness Book of World Records for feeding the most amount of people in the world, and it doesn't matter what your skin color is. It's about giving. So that's what the culture base is. It's about helping others, and that's what I hope to accomplish even more in 5 years.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. So when am I going to get those whiskeys and giving it to my side here? I think it's paying forward, isn't it?
I was shipping you 1946 vintage whiskey for your birth year, but you said that you don't want to talk about your birth year.
Oh, damn. You know what? I should have mentioned it on the show, but thank you very much but at least you thought about it. Thank you very much for that. One last thing before I let you go. Whiskey or single malt or any other drink, neat or ice? That is a myth, and it's a question. People, they say if you put ice, it means that you put water and it's diluting it. So you tell me if that's
there's no wrong or, yeah, there's no wrong or right answer. Have it whichever way you really enjoy. But if you want to listen to all that we were talking about so far, as far as expanding your mind and learning and getting yourself a little uncomfortable, just to expand your mind a little bit and expand your palate, this is my recommendation for you. Girish, you got something in your glass there, right?
Yes.
I know you got it with ice and water. That's okay. Pour yourself a little whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
All right. God's giving you all these senses, right? Mm-hmm. You have your vision, you have your nose, you have your taste. Try to utilize all of them. All right. So look at the color. Every time you pour yourself a whiskey, pour it neat first. Look at the color. Every time you look at that color for different whiskeys, you'll know what's darker or what's lighter. You might research and see, you know what, that's a natural coloring. There's no additives. Oh, it's darker. It's darker. Without even seeing that's 18. If I put a 12 and 18 next to you, you'll see the 18 is darker, right? Mm-hmm. So use your senses. The other is your nose. All right, so we're going to do this little exercise, all right?
Okay.
We're going to dip in one side of your nose into the glass, not all the way in, just enough. Keep your mouth open a little bit. You want to breathe into your mouth and your nose and lock in the other side and nose. Now, I hope you guys are watching this and you're drinking at the same time, so you can do this. Now flip it on the other side. Now, you should, people watching this and Girish, you should have a dominant side, left or right. It's different for everyone. Mm-hmm. Girish, what was your dominant side?
Right now, it's left.
Left. Okay, mine is right. So as you can see, it's different, mm-hmm. right? And people watching this, it's different. So utilize that. Now you know what your dominant side is. Now, if you have a cold or flu or whatever, it's going to vary. On a normal day, you're okay. And you're going to usually have a dominant side all the time, 70 versus 30%, vice versa. So always use that nose to nose. You can do both, but if you do one, you'll have a little bit stronger sense of smell. And next, what you want to do is you want to taste it once. And just say hello to the whiskey. Hello, whiskey. I wasn't expecting you in my mouth because maybe this is the first dram I had in the night and it kind of shocked me a little bit. The first one will always shock your palate of the night or the day, whenever you're having it. You know, your body's not used to it. You've had lunch, you've had water, you had this, you had that. You've been talking to so much, your mouth is dry. First one will shock you. The second one is the one that really opens up and expands. So have a second sip.
I will.
Keep in your mouth and almost do a little bit, no gargle, swirl the whiskey around your mouth. I know this is after the fact, but at least you know going forward. Swirl the whiskey around your mouth, let it coat your entire tongue because you have different sensory areas of your tongue, the front, the sides, the back. And that's how you really taste the whiskey.
Yes.
You've nosed it, you've had it, you got this way, you've already visualized it. Now you taste the whiskey for what it is. Now, have it whichever way you want. You want to put ice in it, you want to put club soda in it, you want to make a cocktail out of it, by all means do that. But at least you've tried it as its core, as its essence of what it's made as. And now you can kind of add to it and finesse it. But you will learn by trying its core by itself. As a butter chicken analogy before, you've tried the meat for what it is, and you know whether it's good or bad, or you enjoy it or not. Maybe it shocks you because you're not used to having neat whiskey, but at least you know. Now you can add the ingredients as a cocktail ingredient. You could add a straw, you could add ice, you could add bitters, you could add cherry, and now it's not chicken anymore, it's butter chicken, right? But you got to try that chicken for what it was for, and that's what I would recommend to expand it. You'll learn more about it, and your palate will get used to it, and you'll be able to pick up nuances of, oh, I get that vanilla notes, I get that candy apple nose, and this and that.
Well, Jazz, thank you so much. This is like really educational for me, even though that I've been drinking for years. But thank you again for that insight about whiskey and bourbon and whiskey E and whiskey without E, and neat and no neat. And thank you very much for that. So, Jazz, before I let you go, any last words before we leave?
Girish, first of all, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here with you. I've known you for a long time, and I know we don't possibly chat on a weekly basis or monthly basis or even yearly basis sometimes, but I think highly of you, and I appreciate you reaching out for this. It helps me give me another avenue to talk about the things I'm passionate about, and I bid you, I wish you only the best with Back to Basics. I would ask the audience watching this to please like the video, comment this video, and any of the Girish's video. Make sure you subscribe, and please share on your Facebook with your friends and get the word out, because people need to understand and get back to basics. Sometimes we're running too fast, and sometimes we need to slow down. If you have a friend who needs to slow down and kind of relax a little bit, maybe this is a video or his channel is a video for him to reset or her to reset. And the last thing I would say is, this is something that I've been doing this year, is I know sometimes we have a lot of dreams and goals, and we're super passionate about different projects, and ideas come to our head while we're sleeping, we're taking a shower, while our boss is talking to us, while our spouse is talking to us. And, we get a little overwhelmed into putting them to action. So one thing I've been doing that's been helping me tremendously is to don't make it a year goal. Cut your goals into shorter pieces. Take a 1 year goal that you want to achieve this year by the end of the year, and divide it up into weeks, right? And each week have a mini goal. If you fail 1 week, it's okay. The next week is there to catch up, but you divide it into mini goals, and treat every Monday. Don't dread Monday. Oh man, I got to go back to work. I was looking forward to the weekend. Weekend's over. No, Monday's morning, you wake up and you conquer Mondays, and you own that week, and you accomplish that mini goal. Treat every Monday as a mini New Year day, right? New Year's resolution, and conquer that goal. And last thing I'll say, even though this was a long stretch, the last few words, is don't cry over spilt milk, because it could have been a whiskey. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. Well, Jazz, thank you very much for coming on the show. Thanks again. So, guys, just like what Jazz said, what did he say? He says, don't spill milk, don't spill whiskey. But what I'm going to say, tonight's poison, right? So today I have a quote of the day. A quote of the day is, tonight, too much of anything is bad, but too much of good whiskey is barely enough, by Mark Twain. And
Amen.
That's what Mark Twain said, and we follow that every day of our lives. So as always, at the end of the episode, I always say, everything in life goes back to basic, and that's what we did today. And Jazz, thanks again. Guys, see you next week. And you keep on subscribing, keep on commenting, good or bad, either way. It will make my show stronger. As always, Thank you guys for supporting me, and I'll see you next week. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Health, it is foundational. And if you're doing keto, if you're doing vegan, vegetarianism, whatever it is, paleo, all of that will improve when you focus on sleep. But if you're not focusing on sleep, if you're sacrificing sleep, but you're doing everything else right, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. So I do talk about, snoring. I do talk about sleep biohacks and so on and so forth, and some tools that you could apply tonight. But the overall theme of the book is for you to understand that sleep is so important. And when you prioritize sleep, you're going to feel better and you're going to look much better.